You're not going to continue to make new investments at GV, though.
Right, I'm just
because this sounds like a more than full-time job.
100%. You can't do a startup, certainly one at global scale like Lime is, without being 100% committed.
So you say that, you know, Lime isn't just about scooters, it's about changing the broader transportation landscape. What do you mean by that?
I think what we're witnessing as a society is something that I would call the great unbundling of the car. So for 100 years, the model of all cities has been you own a car and you do everything with it. You do short trips, long trips, trips to the grocery store, trips to the mountains. You own a car, you do everything with it. But the ride-sharing companies and the rise of mobile phones and smartphones really demonstrated something, which is you can get a vehicle at the click of a button in a moment's notice. And what I think we're witnessing is the unbundling of the car. So you are now going to be able to get the right vehicle at the right time at the click of a button. And micromobility, these trips of roughly 3 miles or less, are a key component of that.
Well, what does that mean for Lime? I mean, I know they don't do just scooters, but what is the vision for how Lime fits in given the competition?
Well, what's very clear right now is that there's a huge interest in this micromobility segment, with e-scooters being the primary form factor. So just look at Lime's growth. The company already in its very short history has done 20 million trips. We're operating in 125 markets globally, and we're adding 5 markets a week. People are riding scooters incessantly until they're basically in the ground. And the reason is, the scooter's in the ground, just to be clear. And the reason is that basically it gets you where you want to go much faster in a short period of time. In a short range. And so that's what we're seeing in every city. And what they're often doing is they're combining it with some other form of public transit. They'll ride a Lime scooter to the train station, take the train into the city, and then ride a Lime scooter to their final destination, and then reverse that when they're heading home.
So do you see Lime expanding beyond scooters?
Yes, I think there is definitely big vision that Lime has, which is ultimately getting you the right electric vehicle for the right trip at the right time. Now, where we're starting is in this 3 miles or less with e-bikes and e-scooters, primarily as the vehicle types, because that's what that is a hole in the market today. But I think there's definitely appetite for other types of electric vehicles as we move forward.
What about the pushback from cities, from residents who don't like the clutter, they don't look good, they've been thrown in the ocean, they've been set on fire?
Yeah, well, you definitely see people doing things on Instagram that they shouldn't be doing with a scooter or an e-bike. You know, my general view is that we're going to figure this out. We're in this phase where these companies, Lime in particular, has been offering scooters for less than 9 months. And in that time, going to 20 million rides in the last 9 months, there's an incredible appetite for this vehicle type. But we're going to figure out with cities how to roll it out effectively, with consumers how to have habits of where you ride it on the street, and how you separate traffic from scooters to increase safety. So there's a huge amount that we're figuring out, but the thing that is exceptionally clear is that people love these devices, and I have never, in 25 years of being in the technology business, seen anything growing faster than this company.
So you don't think it's like the next Segway? I mean, you hear people who are very skeptical, like 100%. This is not going to be the next Uber.
No, this reminds me of, look, I started my first company on the internet in 1993. It was a search engine. And I remember the stories when Amazon started, when people were using credit cards online for the first time. Oh, there was all these complaints about, like, oh, you know, your credit cards are going to get stolen. You're going to have a tremendous amount of fraud. Yeah, there's some of that as a problem. But now everybody assumes you can use your credit card online. I think the same thing is true right now. There's a lot of concern about how these vehicles are going to be integrated into city flows. We're going to figure this out, and the reason is people adore this type of transit, and we're going to work to figure out how to keep traffic separated and how to make them successful.
Was a criticism of the Segway, they were, you know, didn't seem as great for women. There was nowhere to hang your purse, nowhere to hang groceries. Are just as many women riding these scooters as men? You
know, truthfully, I don't know what the demographic split is, but I will say that I think we're in a period of discovery. We're in a period of figuring out what's the right vehicle form factor. It is clear right now that scooters are the form factor that people love, these electric scooters. You can criticize them all you want, but people come off riding with a smile. And the data indicates that people will ride them again and again and again. But we're in a period of discovery. Should it be a 6-inch wheel, an 8-inch wheel, a 10-inch wheel? Should there be a handle for a purse? How do you make sure that should it have suspension or not? I think that in this period of discovery, we're working rapidly to figure out what the right vehicle type is.
There's been some concern that Lime's vision might be too big. I mean, that focus is good. How do you respond to that?
So Google has this great adage of 70, 20, 10. 70% of Google's time and treasure goes to the core business, 20% goes to immediately adjacent businesses, and 10% goes to moonshots. And I actually see from now that I'm going onto the inside that that's really how Lime is allocating its time and treasure. So what I've seen is there's tremendous, breathtaking ambition of what we can do as a company in terms of providing the right electric vehicle at the push of a button. But they are really following this 70-20-10 kind of allocation. 70% to the core business of e-scooters and bikes, e-bikes, 20% to the next adjacency of other electric form factors, and 10% into the moonshots.
Now, GV also invested in Uber back in the day, but it got awkward. Google was doing self-driving, Uber started doing self-driving. Google started doing a carpool service via Waze. Uber wasn't too happy about this. There was the whole Waymo lawsuit. How can we be sure that it won't get awkward like that, given the relationship there?
You know, my general view is that Uber was a set of special circumstances. If you look at the 350 or so active investments that Google Ventures has, there's only been one conflict ever. It just happened to be in the highest profile investment that we had made. So I think the data would indicate that this is an extremely unlikely event.
Now, we've been covering the Google walkout and Google now making changes to the sexual harassment policies. I know that GV is financially independent from Google, but it's still the mothership, essentially. What's been the message at GV to employees?
The message has been consistent, which is essentially, universal respect and basic human decency and a zero tolerance policy has been the norm at GV and continually enforced. And so I don't think there's any change in that whatsoever.
Do you think that these changes will be enough to quell discontent, quell some of the anger out there?
I don't know, but I know that you cannot stop trying to improve things, even if, I don't know if any one thing is ever enough, but in the fullness of time with consistent effort, that is the way real change is made.
So for you, you're leaving I don't want to say a cushy job at GV, but you're leaving a stable job at GV to go be an operator at, exploding unicorn. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to do this?
Well, the first reason is that in 25 years of being in the tech business, like I said, I've never seen anything grow like this. Grow in terms of revenue, have this kind of product market fit, have immediate global scale and impact. And that's incredibly exciting. Like, the old model of venture was that when you went into venture after being an operator, so I was an operator for 15 years, you're hanging up your cleats, you're never getting back on the field. I think the new model of venture, if I look at Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn, if I look at Anil Bhusri at Greylock and Workday, if I look at Keith Raboy at Open Door and Khosla Ventures, this new model is to be more fluid between those two things, because I think it makes you better in all these cases. And truthfully, it's also back to the future. This is what venture did in the 70s and 80s.
Do you worry about a winter slowdown with scooters? I mean, it seems like it could certainly be seasonal. I mean, if there was snow and ice on the roads, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have the business is so new in 9 months of operating on the scooter side. They have more history on the bike and e-bike side. But I think the expectation is, sure, of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, there's going to be some level of natural slowdown as you get inclement weather. Part of the reason you want to offer multiple vehicle types is that you can make up for some of that. And in addition, why you want to go into the Southern Hemisphere is so that you can have offsetting revenue and ride trips per day. Also remember that these vehicles are movable, so we can take fleets from the Northeast and move them into Latin America because this is a fixed asset business as opposed to a virtual fleet like in something like Uber.
That it's very intensive to do all of that transport.
100%.
There was just a recall on some of the scooters. When it comes to safety, how do you make sure that you can keep all this stuff and be profitable when a ride is only just a couple of bucks?
There is no denying that this is an operationally complicated business, but that is both a challenge and an opportunity. My general view is that when you have an operationally complicated business, knowing how to operate it effectively becomes a long-term barrier to entry, because these are not easy businesses to run at global scale. Remember, this is a vertically integrated company. We design and manufacture all of our own vehicles. In addition, we then transport them. In addition, then we operate those fleets inside of any individual market. There is no denying it is complicated, but if you can do that effectively and efficiently, I think that gives you a real edge. in terms of making a very profitable, on both the unit economic business and a corporate level entity, very profitable enterprise.